Good morning, everyone. Today we'll be taking a first look at Lumikai's State of India Gaming Research Report for FY 2023. This report is the culmination of a year-long effort tracking the market and staying abreast of current developments, all with the sole aim of separating the signal from the noise. So let's get started. So India gaming was very visible this year. There's been some good developments and some not so good. We saw game bans, including bans on Free Fire and BGMI, and we saw the legislation of the RMG sector and the imposition of a fairly aggressive taxation policy. However, despite the negative noise, the industry continues to surprise. India's gaming industry last year clocked $3.1 billion in revenue, up from $2.6 billion last year, and we expect revenues to reach $7.5 billion by FY 2028. Now, contrary to the popular belief that real money gaming is the vast majority of the market, we continue to see strong growth in the emergence of IAPs and ads as viable business models. The biggest beneficiaries last year of IAPs and ads revenue were mid-core titles like BGMI and Free Fire. However, in their absence, the popular view was that the market around IAPs would collapse. That has not been the case. IAPs and ads largely held strong on account of three major structural reasons. Firstly, users have simply migrated to new games and new IP. Secondly, there's been a higher willingness to pay for in-game items with a lot more familiarity and ease of payments around UPI. And thirdly, we've also seen a migration of users from RMG to other games. Over the course of the next 5 years, we see a transition towards more IAPs-based and ad-led monetization, leading to about $5 billion of upside over the next 4 to 5 years. Now, RMG as a business model has been hit. Whilst it saw growth due to fantasy in the World Cup last year, overall, the market has started to soften. With mature players who are well capitalized, innovation and disruption has been increasingly unlikely, and the triple threat of taxation, compliance, and legislation will result in shutdowns and industry consolidations. As a mature industry without challenges, growth rates need to be, therefore, adjusted. With this in mind, given the upcoming protracted taxation treatment, we believe RMG growth in India is likely to be muted, and revenues will settle at around $2.4 billion in FY28, led by a few large incumbent players. So I'm going to touch briefly on the engagement side of things. With an increase in smartphone users, we see a secular upward trend in the number of gamers in the country. We also see an increase in average time spent on games, and average time spent has increased to about 10 to 12 hours per week, which is rivaling mature global games markets. And at the same time, India continues to be a key market for game downloads. India is now the second largest game download market in the world, 15.4 billion game downloads last year, showcasing an increasing propensity to pay and play games at scale. Okay, so some interesting trends on monetization have also been observed in the last year. With the suspension of two games, BGMI and Free Fire, which were flag bearers of India's in-app purchase monetization, gone, the prevailing view was that the in-app purchase and ads market in India would largely collapse. However, data shows otherwise. IAP revenue, excluding BGMI and Free Fire, actually grew more than 37% during the last year. Many parts of this are explained and corroborated by the consumer surveys and insights that we undertook, which we'll get onto shortly. We also saw ARPU hold steady at about $20, which has been around the same as the previous year. And at the same time, we see the emergence of new paying users in games as well, resulting in a high proportion of users converting into paid users, about 140 million paid users in the last financial year. We've also seen the strengthening of ad eCPMs, and anyone who's been tracking the India market will probably be surprised to see these numbers as much as we were, but aggregate ad eCPMs in India are now trending at around $1, a pretty big uplift from previous years. Now, for the next section on insights and research, I'll hand it over to Aditya, who will walk us through the results from our consumer survey.
Thank you, Justin. Yeah, moving on to some key observations and findings from our primary research. But before that, a quick note on how exactly and why exactly we conduct these surveys. So this year, like every year, we tied up with Ipsos, which is a reputed multinational market research firm, to conduct this primary survey of gamers for us. Ipsos picks a randomized sample of smartphone users from across India with whom they interact with, and we serve them a questionnaire of around 60 very carefully drafted questions which seeks insights on gamer behavior, payment behavior, engagement behavior, and so on. So this year we've surveyed over 2,000 users, and here are the key insights we've learned for the period of the last 12 months. Starting with demographics, the male to female ratio of gamers was roughly 60-40, breaking a long-standing myth that gaming is a heavily male-dominated activity. Furthermore, half of our surveyed gamers were in the 18 to 30 age group, a maturing user profile with promising propensity to pay as they enter up and rise up in the workforce. Another crucial finding here is an increase in gamers from non-metro regions, going from 57% in 2022 to 66% in 2023, which tells us that gaming is not necessarily a tier 1 phenomena only anymore. These observations on demographics strongly challenge the preconceived notion that it's only rich boys in urban cities that are playing games. There's a promising diversity to the audiences that are now engaging with games, which bodes well for the entire industry. Moving on to gamer preferences, a bunch of studies globally have shown that the key motivation for gamers in Western markets is largely competition and mastery. Users in India, however, seem to view gaming as an activity to de-stress, but more importantly, to connect and socialize with other gamers and friends and family, with competition not even in the top 3 gamer motivations that we studied. The reason to stop playing games are as important. The surveyed users stated that a key reason for them to stop playing a game is them completing all the game's objectives, which brings even more importance to this idea of forever games, where there are strong live ops, long-term retention hooks to keep a user engaged over the long term. Furthermore, a large majority of users stated that they stop playing when they get fed up of seeing too many ads. While we do believe that ads will continue to be a very important monetization source for users, it's important to give users agency with those ads. And the importance of being smart with your ads as a developer has sort of come to light, and also the importance of using more engaging ad formats. Lastly, we also see that users stop playing a game if a game falls out of trend, meaning that sometimes an IP can reach a certain saturation level with players, and as a result, players seek out new games to play. How do gamers find and select games? Well, by far, gamers in India rely the most on friends and family recommendations. That was the case in last year's survey as well, and this ties also well back into our earlier point regarding gamers playing to socialize and playing games that are in trend. We've also sought insights on the top games that gamers play and pay for. Casual was the most played genre, as is evidenced by the presence of games such as Candy Crush and Ludo King very high up on this list. Interestingly, we only see one real money game in the top played games, which is Dream 11. On the payment side of things, we are seeing increasing diversity in the kinds of games that users pay for, with a diverse split between mid-core, casual, and real money games. Exploring some engagement and payment behaviors from our sample, as mentioned earlier, average weekly time spent has gone up 20% at an aggregate level, though we've also seen a very marked increase in time spent in more mature genres such as mid-core, and even for users playing PC and console games. This ties in nicely to the fact that over the last 12 months, over 40% of our users stated that while they only earlier used to play casual games, they now play all sorts of games. Furthermore, 30% of our users stated that they like to experiment with new games and game genres now. Around 23% of our users have said they've become new paying users in gaming, which also corroborates our conversion rate to paying users. On the payment side of things, we're seeing increasing diversity in the kind of payments being made and the kind of purchases that gamers make. You can see that around 60% of our users said that they partake in in-app purchases. Some users have also shown a proclivity to subscription-like content such as battle passes and season passes in games. UPI, of course, has been an absolute game changer on the payment infrastructure side of things, and gaming has been a key benefactor. A very clear majority of gamers say that they use UPI to make payments in-game. One can imagine that an easy, seamless mode of payment such as UPI is a lot more convenient when making microtransactions as opposed to using, say, debit cards or credit cards. Lastly, given the recent changes in taxation and RMG around TDS and GST, we asked users questions on the same to gauge their sentiment. Around 60% of users stated that these changes will negatively impact their participation in real money games. That said, we'd like to point out that the survey was conducted before the GST changes actually came into force earlier this month, and that earlier in October, and that the true impact of this in user behavior remains to be seen. We are also seeing some platforms absorb users' GST burden, and in that case, the negative effect of user engagement, at least in the short term, might not be as pronounced. It's very hard for us to comment on the sustainability of this particular method. We do estimate that it will negatively impact unit metrics and therefore payback periods for these platforms. I'd now like to hand the mic back over to Justin to take us to the rest of the report.
Now, there's been plenty of news about RMG recently. It's been an eventful year with some ups and some downs. The highlight has been that the government has now made a clear distinction between cash and non-cash based gaming, which is a big change. Last year, the government set up the IGDC task force, that's Animation, Video Games and Comics Task Force, outlining a broad set of 3 pillars in its vision. The first of these is to encourage Make in India for India and the world IP. The second, to create world-class export products out of India. And the third, to promote Indian-created content. So that's content created in India by domestic studios. A number of recommendations have come out of the proposals from the IGDC task force. Firstly, on the market development front, these have included awareness campaigns, dedicated annual events for the sector, and an IP protection framework. On the infrastructure side, this has included national and regional centers of excellence to oversee the IGDC sector development, R&D centers at educational institutions, and tech incubators to promote investment in the sector. Talent development has also been encouraged with dedicated IGDC scholarships and a job aggregation portal, which is to be set up by the industry's own players. And lastly, a wide range of financial incentives were also announced, including tax breaks for global players looking to set up shop in India, R&D grants for the sector, and grants for local production companies. So a fairly comprehensive set of proposals that have come through from the IGDC task force. These initiatives have been very welcome news for the industry as a whole, and they're a clear sign that the government is taking a progressive, long-term supportive role in the development of the sector. These measures have been further encouraged by the recognition of esports as part of official multi-sporting events by the Government of India, with the setting up of a 15-member contingent for the esports sector drawn from the industry's own leadership. Now, despite all of these welcome changes, we've also got to recognize the fact that the GST regulations that have recently been handed down for games with cash-based outcomes or the RMG sector have hurt the market. Previously, just to provide some context, a flat 18% tax was paid on gross gaming revenue for RMG companies. This has now been amended to 28% on all deposits, so a significant increase in tax liability for the RMG sector. The outcome of this change has been felt across the RMG sector and has also been reflected on our downward forecast as we discussed earlier in the presentation. One silver lining for the RMG sector has been the establishment of SRB, or self-regulating body regulations by METI. Now, METI is the nodal ministry for online gaming, and they have proposed a framework which would place regulation of the industry at large into the hands of the industry itself. A very welcome move, which provides clarity and consistency to games industry's developers and players at large. Okay. So we close with a slide on India's digital macro tailwinds and the current state of the investment landscape for gaming in India. We continue to see a rapidly improving digital infrastructure across key drivers, which is benefiting the growth of gaming as a whole in the country. On the data infrastructure side, per capita data usage has doubled from 15 gigabytes to 30 gigabytes per month, whilst the cost of data consumption has stayed amongst the lowest in the world. India has also climbed up in the data speed rankings from 117th in the world at the beginning of 2023 to 47th in the world today, just within the space of a year. And total 5G subs is projected to grow from about 20 million today to over 670 million by 2028. So a massive growth in 5G penetration expected over the next 4 to 5 years. Digital transactions have also risen dramatically from about 5.3 billion in 2019, which is a healthy number, to about 84 billion today. Massive increase, and this is helping to drive monetization across gaming, as we discussed earlier as well. India now has nearly 50% of the world's digital transactions, and UPI has been an absolute game changer for monetization across all digital media, including gaming. On the development side, India continues to be a major hub for global game developers with big players including Krafton, Glue, Ubisoft, Zynga, EA, operating large teams in the region. We also host several large-scale developers who are building in India for global users, companies such as Bombay Play, Spearmint Games, Play Simple, Gameberry Labs, both in terms of global and these local developers. India has now cemented its position as a hub for global games development. Now, moving on to the investment outlook, no surprises here. There has been a global funding winter across all sectors, not just gaming, and this has been mirrored in India. Despite this, there are multiple large-scale funds still active in the India gaming scene, including Makers, Griffin, Peak, Courtside, Steadview, and of course Lumikai. At the same time, we've also seen an increase in strategic capital coming into the ecosystem. As an example, PlayStation last year launched its India Hero project, supporting emerging developers and with capital and know-how and distribution. Krafton has also doubled down on its investments in India, targeting up to 150 million in capital deployment with a separate incubator program. And Mixi, more recently, has committed $50 million in a new CVC, corporate venture arm, to gaming and interactive media and lifestyle. The growth of all of this strategic capital into the ecosystem is a strong validation of the sector's potential, and will continue to attract and catalyze innovation and talent into India's gaming market. So, yeah, that wraps up our executive summary of India's gaming sector for FY 2023. If you have any questions, feel free to ping any of the Lumikai team. We're here at IGDC. You can also reach us at hello@lumikai.com. The executive summary will be going up on our website later on today, so please take a look for that, and you can review it at your leisure. That concludes the presentation for this morning. Thank you so much for listening.
Right, so that was awesome. I like to go ahead and Justin and I was talking about it. What is the one thing that is kind of defining some of these markets, and especially India? And I think that I was using the faffy word called hope. Everyone just believes tomorrow is better than today, at least in this market. And I think that's why a lot of you are here. We travel across the world. I think there is no other market which exudes this tomorrow is better than today attitude and this feeling that is there in India. And in this, just some questions. First, I'm actually going to go ahead and jump onto you, Prashant. Tell us tell us about the methodology of some of this, right? Like Aditya talked about some of this, but what's the way you actually got this done?
Yeah, thank you. So this has actually now become a run-of-the-mill right now. This is the second year that we're doing this. So it's pretty much standard. We kind of did a top-down and a bottom-up approach into this. When I say top-down and a bottom-up, what we did is we used external data which is coming in from, third-party available data, secondary research, and put it in one side. The other side of it is primary research, which would come from our survey that we kind of conducted. Also, a bit of proprietary data which is present with various partners who are associated with this survey. Lumikai has a bunch of things. We interviewed a lot of players associated with this particular ecosystem, whether it is associations or the development organizations, etc. So we got the data from this, kind of put it all in one place. Then, of course, there is a bunch of things which keeps changing, right? There is regulation which is changing in. There is certain facts on the ground which change in. You need to adjust the growth thing based on what's the sentiment around this. We brought that in, and then ultimately you see what's there in front of you.
And just to clarify, the scope of this work is a financial year? Which is that from when to when?
Yes, so it's a good one there for clarify. It's normally 1st April to 31st March. That's the financial year.
That's for some people who are not from the country. Just wanted to go ahead and put that context. Justin, we've talked about this funding winter, which is there. And we see it when we go outside, go ahead and see it. And then obviously, some of that has impacted India. But has the color of capital changed? Earlier, 2021, 2022, you used to go ahead and see a lot of American and European capital. We are now seeing a point of inflection with Japan and Korea going in looking actively, and you're Mr. Japan for me. So both at a Lumikai level, are you seeing your LPs value or LPs mix changing, or even outside Lumikai? What's your comment on that?
Yeah, it's a great question. Look, I think we've always, as a fund, seen a ton of strategic interest from especially the Japanese, the Korean, the Southeast Asian LPs. There's always been a strong interest in the India market there. If you look at just kind of yield rates in Japan of 1%, there's clearly a lot of capital in the market there that's there to be deployed. So I think that's one. I think the second point around this is a lot of the Japanese and Southeast Asian folks kind of missed out on that first China wave of innovation. They came into the market a little bit late, and they kind of missed out on that great growth period that we saw 2005, 2015. And when we started the fund, I spent quite a lot of time in Japan, and I had networks with a lot of the Japanese strategics and Korean strategics. And we had a thesis around kind of how this market was reaching an inflection point and was due to really kind of hit what we call a Cambrian explosion moment. But we weren't the only people to notice that. We had conversations with a lot of the Japanese and the Korean strategics specifically, and they shared our view. And they didn't want to miss out on this in the way that perhaps some of them missed out on that China wave. So I think that's the second. And I think, thirdly, frankly, as a fund, Lumikai has done a lot of education in the market. Obviously we do great initiatives with our partners here, like the State of India Gaming Report. We develop a lot of theses, we publish a lot of blogs, we do podcasts, etc. I think through that process, we've done a lot of evangelism for the market. And, being here in Asia and personally, spending a lot of time in Japan and Korea, just through, frankly, quite a lot of hustle, we've managed to attract a lot of these strategic players who initially, been working with us and continue to work with us, but increasingly now are coming into the market direct as well, which is a great validation of the potential of the sector.
I think you, Lumikai, and you have done specifically great work to go out and build that out, so kudos. Aditya, for you, you're very part of the big little thing called Google. It's part of our lives. It's something that is there, and especially for people who are developers here. And you and I have been discussing around this thesis on what is really the India formula, the secret sauce as such. And you've been seeing a lot of these international companies come to India. What are the 2-3 things that both they can learn from us and we can learn from them?
Firstly, just reflecting on the first thing that you said about tomorrow is always better. You go to many industry conferences, and the energy that you see in a gaming conference tells you that there's a very different world and going on. So the report, I think, it justifies that. To me, what's changed from a global developers wanting to come to India is that Indians spend a lot of time playing. This year, the headline is there are many Indians who spend time playing, but there are many Indians who are also putting money into games. The report talked about 140 million Indians who are now buyers. There is no digital category in India today that has more than this many buyers. So by far, we have the highest number of buyers. Our ARPUs are low, but the ARPUs are continuing to move up. At $20, it's significantly better than where it was. And with all the things happening around payment friction going away, middle class rising, I think ARPUs will only go up. But I feel for the last few years, the headline has always been, BGMI and Free Fire have cracked India. But what we've seen in 2023 is I'm literally getting a call every week from one of my counterparts in another country who runs Play there saying, hey, I have a company that wants to launch in India. And over the last few months, I think the way Roblox has come in, the way Pokemon Go has come in, EA has always been doing well, but they're seeing big growth. You're seeing big global titles do well in India. And I think what's changed is that there's this localization formula. Initially, it was, hey, I have a good game. Let me just launch it in India. The standard thing was, hey, $1 is a great price. Let's draw a dollar price and get going in India. We've done a bunch of analysis, and interestingly, 20 to 30 rupees is the best price in which to convert a new buyer. So that's a great entry point. So the first thing is, what is the right pricing for India? Second is a lot of markets don't understand what is this UPI phenomenon going on. If you have a game where you have to pay with credit card, there's going to be massive dropout right there. So UPI and having the right forms of payment in your game becomes super important. So I think that's 1 and 2. I think those are the 2 hygiene to get going. Third, I think, is device. I think a lot of us who develop games will think about the best devices on which it works. The device landscape in India is very different. Yep. Are you optimizing to the right set of devices? And I think the range of devices is so much wider here that that's important. Fourth really becomes content and language. And I say that together because it's cultural context, and I think that a lot of folks get well. But what kind of languages? I think everyone thinks, oh, India has like 25 languages. You don't need to start with 25. Start with 1, start with 2, and then build out. So I think that becomes an important thing. And finally, I think everybody wants to play a great game, but with a good deal. Like, I think we talked about it at Justin's event a few days ago. Like, it has to be aspirational and affordable. And I think if you think about what the right set of payment partners that you begin to drive promotions, what are the other apps and games that you can potentially participate with, I think that creates a flywheel. So we're trying to build this whole thing like a localization score that we can tell a company that, hey, this is where you are. You're on 1 to 5, you're at 2. But if you do those 3 things, you'll get to 4, and 4 will like many X the business that you can do.
And just sticking on this, and then I'll go back to the other panelists. One of the things I've seen, and this has been with Chinese, Japanese, American, European developers, is they heavily index on analytics, right? It's something that they really care about. And no judgment here, and this is not me generalizing, but I've not seen that as much with Indian developers as such, right? They'll build the game really well and then hope everything will be okay, versus this. What's your thesis on that?
So I like to think that everybody gets something right. We talked about localization. I think people building games here get that very instinctively. I don't think you really need to think about these levers. But the flip side is true. I think how many game companies today, local companies, have an analytics team? Whether in-house or, like we talked about, even outsourced. How much time may you spend looking at your data just on your play console? And I think stuff like, how is your game performing across different devices? What's your ANR rates? Who's actually playing your game? What's the profile? A lot of people think, oh, Gen Zs are playing my game. Gen Zs are not playing your game. So I think just getting deep into the analytics, I think analytics really supercharges your creative. And I always like to think of this hamburger example, you know, like the most important thing is the creative, is the game, is the content right in the middle. But your data and analytics are the 2 buns that if you really add that to your amazing burger, then you got some really well supercharged machinery running.
Justin, I know this is not something we have sometimes, so I thought I'd take some advantage of this. One very nice stat that you want to go ahead and do, and we've been talking, I think Saloni was talking to me about it. She was just going on a train, and she asks, at the metro station, she asked someone who's playing a game on their phone, saying, what you doing? And he's like, so she says, are you playing a game? The guy said, no. She's like, but you're playing a game. He says, oh no, this is time pass. Has Indian gaming, and I say this with respect, become a very strong indicator of time pass? Is this the time pass economy?
Yeah, I mean, you know, if you look at, you know, and we had this in our consumer survey, kind of top reasons to play. And if you look at kind of Western markets, a lot of it is really around, you know, why do people play mobile games? Why do they play video games? They're playing for competition. They're playing for, you know, creativity or self-expression or whatever it might be. I think the reality is that, you know, in India, time pass is a very large reason why people play games. I don't exactly know why that is, but that turns out to be, at least in the consumer survey we did at about 2,500 gamers, that came through as a very compelling reason. There are other reasons as well. You know, people like to, there is a certain contingent that plays RMG that wants to earn money, etc. But that is a point of differentiation we've seen between the India market and some of the Western markets specifically, which is that you know, time pass is one of the leading reasons why people are playing games.
Yeah. And I think looking at that has often, I come from
and relaxation. Relaxation
is similar.
Yeah.
So, and I come from an esports perspective. I was like, yeah, why is this person not playing competitively? He's like, no, I don't want to. I just want to go, instead of watching YouTube or doom scrolling on Instagram, they play video games. Yeah. And that's actually a very good indicator of what I call the adjacencies in that ecosystem that are out there. Yeah.
Well, I mean, clearly there's, you know, you're in this business, there is a large contingent that are playing competitively, and I was just at an event, a BGMI event 3 or 4 days ago, and the energy in that room was insane, and there was nothing but competition in that room. I wanted to maybe throw a question back at you, and just, you know, I know we didn't cover esports too much in our presentation, but you know, what are you excited about in terms of the future of esports, and what are some of the inflection points that you're seeing over the next 4 or 5 years? Where do you see this market going?
I think the classical definition of esports is dying, which is one of my very good friends, 2 of my very good friends, Jens Ilger and Ralf Reichart, built ESL. And they've built it as a hardcore competitive company, which is there. And I think that model works really well, but suffers the same consequences as any sport does, and I consider esports sports, as any sports does, that doesn't have an ecosystem approach around it. So a Liberty Media kind of an approach around Formula One is a much more viable treatment of esports than just a pure classical test match cricket kind of a treatment. So you need the song and dance, you need the music festival, you need the celebration, and from tomorrow, as part of India Joy and IGDC, we have DreamHack next there, and DreamHack's a celebration of gaming, right? I have one competition there maybe, but most of the people are coming there for cosplay, for meeting the streamers, going and just hanging out, playing chess. Parents are coming in looking at what this ecosystem is, and I think if we build below the iceberg, below the water, and the foundations of esports to be extremely robust around profitability, around sustainability of the business, you'll be able to do bigger and better esports. Otherwise, if you just do esports for the sake of esports and you lose money, I think that business model, unfortunately, is no longer viable. But time is up for us, and we are all around here. IGDC is there. You'll see us walking around. If you need to go and have a chat with any of us, just flag us down, say hello. This is the nature of IGDC. I'm one of the people who are one of the organizers behind IGDC. So just honestly, that's the vibe of this place. Stop us, ask us a question, happy to answer. And I'll see you around in the market. Cheers.